This year brings the publications of 3 very special papers to mark the 125th anniversary of the GSA. And joining me now is the editor of one of them, Victor Baker from the University of Arizona. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
And the title of your paper, which is actually a book, as I understand it, is called Rethinking the Fabric of Geology. Tell us a little bit about that.
50 years ago, for the 75th anniversary of the Geological Society of America, there was a rather unique publication called The Fabric of Geology, which dealt with philosophical issues in geology and the relation of geology to society, a number of issues that are peripheral to just the doing of the science of geology. That was a remarkable book, but it was mainly many chapters by geologists. Not a single philosopher contributed to that book. And in the 50 years since, there have been many changes in the nature of the philosophy of science, as well as changes in the relationship of earth science and geology in particular to society and to other issues that are peripheral to the just doing of geology. So for example, in our volume, there are 4 philosophers, really real philosophers, who contributed to the 10 chapters in our volume. That's a major change. And we also have geologists that are really concerned about different kinds of issues than were present in the time period 50 years ago.
Can you briefly tell us some of the essays that are covered in this?
Well, the book is divided into 4 sections. The first section is philosophical, the second is geological mapping, the third deals with predictive modeling, and the fourth deals with societal and policy and sort of political issues. In the philosophical section, the main topics are concerned with the nature of geology as a historical science. Now, this is an interesting issue because 50 years ago, science was pretty much thought by the philosophers be just equivalent to what physicists did, basically experimental theoretical science. And now philosophers of science have moved on from this position because of problems of logic that were found with what was being talked about 50 years ago.
Let's talk a little bit more, if you can, about why rethinking it is so important. You've mentioned the philosophical component, technology, some other ideas?
Many changes have occurred. We have a section on computer modeling, and not how to do it, but the implications of that. Because of advances in technology that you refer to, and mainly computational capabilities, it is possible to solve many of the kinds of complex equations that people were aware of 50 years ago, but they had no way to deal with the mathematics in them because the solutions were so difficult. So this has resulted in a kind of revolution in what's called predictive modeling. And this had huge consequences because the predictive models are they're of great interest to those who view science as an authoritative basis for action. And they cite these models as a kind of truth that can be used to say what the future is going to be and such things. And that has huge philosophical implications. There's also been advances in that fundamental thing geologists do called geological mapping. That's often misunderstood by those in other sciences. And we have a couple of contributions in that regard, including one on the history of geological mapping, which has a long tradition, and that contribution has a suggestion as to what the first geological map was. And then we have a detailed discussion of where geological mapping is going in the future. And then the last section in the book deals with issues of society and education and the sort of political consequences. We have huge issues in regard to the climate change that is affecting our planet and arguments over whether that is something that is real, that has to be, public action has to be taken. And there's very real debates going on in which philosophical issues are often just assumed without questioning them, and the contributions in that section talk about that kind of issue. Similarly in education, in our education process, we have an emphasis on basically ideas of education from 100 years ago. Our schools talk about science as physics, chemistry, and biology, PCBs. And earth science is generally viewed as a secondary kind of activity, as though it's derivative from the other things. Well, this is completely contrary to what modern philosophy of science is discovering. And so our education of young people in regard to earth science, there's contributions in the volume that are dealing with the implications of that.
All right. So Victor Baker, editor of the Rethinking the Fabric of Geology. I know a lot of the members of GSA and people here at this conference are looking forward to seeing that in the bookstore here. So thank you so much for your time and giving us some insight on that. Victor Baker from the University of Arizona.